This is the Snodgrass podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I have an amazing guest for you guys. So smart, Mr. Mark Miller. He has worked with the Chick Fil-A. I believe he said he was the 16th corporate member or employee of Chick Fil-A. He's been working with Chick Fil-A for over 40 years. He has written his 10th book. This is called Smart Leadership. 4 simple choices to scale your impact. You guys are definitely going to read this book. It is filled with so much content, so much meat, that if you are a leader and you want to figure out how to make better decisions, grow more capacity, have more margin, get real with yourself as a leader, and to grow as a person and to grow your organization, this is a book for you. But right now, go over to the Brett Snodgrass channel on YouTube and also subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section, and I'll reply to that as soon as I can. But now I want to introduce you to the one and only Mark Miller. What's going on, Mark?
And excited to be with you today.
I'm super excited for this. Number one, I love Chick Fil-A. We probably go there at least twice a week, and you've been with the company for many years now. I'm not going to say how many. You can say that if you want.
About 100 years. Yeah, about 100 years.
But my family loves Chick Fil-A. I got 4 kids, so we're all about Chick Fil-A. And I love authors. I love interviewing authors. And you have this new book called Smart Leadership, 4 Simple Choices to Scale Your Impact. And I love that word, impact. That's what, right, we get to this certain point where it is really all about people and impact. And you really had done that with this book. I went through this book this week. It is jam-packed. I'm going to have to go through it again. Smart leadership, guys. So we're going to talk about that a lot on this show. But before we get into that, Mark, I want to ask you this question. Who is Mark Miller?
Mark Miller is a chicken salesman from Atlanta. As you mentioned, I've been on the corporate staff here over 40 years. I was the 16th corporate employee. I'm a husband, a father, a grandfather, a guy who's trying to add value and serve leaders around the world.
Man, I love that. And you're doing such a great job. I mean, Smart Leadership isn't your first rodeo with books. I think you've had, maybe this is your 10th?
It's my 10th.
10th book.
Yes.
So this
but
is...
It's different. A quick word to any of your listeners who've read my previous books. I want to prepare them. All of the others were business fables, the creative nonfiction. And my publisher and family and friends told me it was time to write a real book, which I tried not to take offense to that. I worked really hard on all those other books. But this is a traditional leadership book, a traditional business book. And I'm excited about it, even though I approached it like an experiment. There's one fundamental reason I'm so excited, and you already referenced it, is with all of the fables, the publishers wouldn't let me put a lot of tactics in the book. They said, you'll destroy a fable with tactics. I mean, I wrote one manuscript several years ago. They made me take 75% of the content out.
Wow.
And they said, look, you're not writing a field guide. And so, by the way, that's when we started writing field guides to support all of the fables. The fundamental problem, 95% of the people in the world who read the book never saw the field guide.
Right.
So when they said you can do a traditional leadership book, I said, does that mean I can include tactics?
Yeah.
And they said, absolutely. Because the question I get over and over and over from leaders all over the world is, yes, but how? And so in Smart Leadership, we devoted 8 full chapters to tactics and others sprinkled throughout the remaining chapters. So that's when you reference the fact it's chock full of ideas. That's one of the things that excites me about this book.
Yeah, that's interesting. I got a personal question for you, by the way, and before we really dive into the book, because I have so many questions about that. But so author, fable versus kind of this they're both kind of nonfiction. I don't know what you maybe call a fable because it's real, but it's kind of, an allegory sort of thing. But what's your mindset going into this, writing a fable versus this particular book?
Well, I saw it as an opportunity to stretch and to learn and to grow. I mean, I've read a lot of leadership books in my career, but I'd actually never thought about how you would write one. And I've never fancied myself as a writer. Again, I'm a chicken salesman, the accidental author. That's another story for another day. But I've always fancied myself more as a storyteller. And so with all the previous books, there was a tremendous amount of rigor. Several of the previous books, we spent millions of dollars researching. One of them particularly, we spent 4 years doing research. We spent millions of dollars, and then I go write a story about it, which is great. I mean, so it's not an absence of rigor, but that's what my publisher was fearful of. He said, for many reasons, people generally don't assume there's rigor behind a fable. They assume it's just something you dreamed up, one night and thought about, hey, why don't we do this? And they said, this will give you a chance to showcase some of the rigor and diligence behind the books. So I went into it thinking it was an experiment. What I didn't realize is how difficult it would be for me. Now, I know for other writers, maybe this is not a very steep hill to climb, but for me, writing a fable, if I want to make a point, I have a character say it.
Yeah.
And if I don't have a character to say it, I make up a character to say it, right?
Exactly.
And now I need an example from industry, an example from the nonprofit world. I need statistics to support it. I need to include this in the endnotes and the bibliography. And so the amount of time, the research was comparable. We spent a couple $1 million doing research for this book and spent a couple of years. I had a research team of 6, 8, 10 people working on it. But the actual writing took 50 times longer.
Wow.
At least than writing a parable. So that was a bit of an awakening for me. Like, okay, this is gonna be different.
It definitely sounds like it. That was just something because I'm interested in writing a book, and I'm kind of like in that zone of which direction to go. But I really want to dive into smart leadership, and so you start off the book with a quote by Peter Drucker, and he talk about effectiveness can be learned, effectiveness must be learned, and this really kind of stopped you in your tracks and kind of take us into that. Why was that so impactful for you?
Well, I think one of my mentors told me a long time ago that 2 things determine the value of a book: the content and the context. That you might read a book today that doesn't meet you where you are. It doesn't strike a chord emotionally. It doesn't meet a felt need. Well, when I first read that statement from Peter Drucker, it was 40 years ago. And I was a young leader who was struggling with, how do I add more value? How do I increase my contribution? I didn't even have the words to articulate it. And then I came across the effective executive. And I said, yeah, what I'm looking for is how to be more effective. So it was Drucker's great content, which I do recommend. Even in the introduction to my book, I tell people, if you've not read The Effective Executive, you should put down Smart Leadership and go get The Effective Executive. Now, some people go, well, that's crazy. That book was written 60 years ago. Yeah, it's the source of the Nile. All of the leadership books in the world emanate from Drucker's book, The Effective Executive. And so it's great content, and it spoke to me in that season of my life. And it launched for me a more focused, career-long search for how to be more effective. So when we sat down for the very first meeting with the research team for Smart Leadership, I made them all go read The Effective Executive. I said, we're going to write the modern equivalent of that. I mean, I'm certainly not Peter Drucker, don't pretend to be, but I want to look for the things that will help today's leaders be more effective, just like he did 50, 60 years ago. And so that's why that spoke to me as we launched this project.
Interesting. I have not read The Effective Executive, so I'm going to have to go get that right now. So
I think you should.
Thank you for that. So then you go into a chapter called Swimming in Quicksand, and you kind of talk about that most leaders, and I mostly have business leaders on this show, entrepreneurs, and our personality is at some point in some season of our life, we end up in this sort of quicksand. We didn't mean to get there, but we wake up one day and we just feel stuck, and we're sinking, and we're exhausted and stressed and anxiety and all that stuff. So you focus this chapter on swimming in quicksand. I want to get your verbiage on what is that? What are you seeing with that?
So let me give you the quick backstory. When we start a project, we like to start with a hypothesis. Now, I try not to reach conclusions early because I don't want to do research to validate my bias. but when asked, why are you doing this book? It was born from the observation that I and others on my team said, we think we see more and more leaders struggling. That was this is pre-COVID. We think there seemed to be a greater number of leaders struggling. And so we said, why is that? And we began to talk to leaders about their struggles, some of the very, very early preliminary work. And they talked about busyness, and they talked about complexity, and they talked about distractions. And we said, okay, how do we get our head around all of this stuff? And we said, it's sort of like quicksand. And so we began the work, honestly thinking the problem is the quicksand. And what we determined is, early, we said, whoa. There are leaders who aren't in the quicksand, or if they're in it, they got out.
True.
And we said, okay, the villain is not the quicksand. The quicksand is the quicksand.
Yeah.
We're the villain because our choices have kept us a prisoner of the quicksand, or our choices have allowed us to escape. Because you mentioned it earlier, we're all in there from time to time. We don't go there on purpose. I've never met a leader that said, I think I'm going to get up today and go find some quicksand and jump in it, right? It doesn't happen like that. But when you're in it, you only have three options. And you went through it really quick, but I want to be clear. The first option is just to sink, just to quit, to give up, to die. Now, you may not die, but your influence and your hopes and your dreams and your aspirations can be extinguished. Yeah. Well, we don't want any leader to do that. What most leaders do is they learn to swim in it. Well, that's not sustainable. It's exhausting. But see, we're leaders, and so we just keep swimming. It's like when the going gets tough, the tough get going. We just have to keep doing this.
Work harder, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of leaders say, and this is the verbiage they use is, I don't know how long I can keep this up.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, you're reading stuff about the Great Resignation, and certainly that's not confined to the leadership ranks, but I think that's part of what you're seeing is leaders are just saying, this is just too hard. In part because COVID has made all of this harder. I don't think COVID is the problem, but it has magnified the problem. It has intensified the problem. And so some leaders are giving up, some leaders are swimming, but then the third group are those men and women that we ended up focusing on. They're the ones that have escaped. And we said, let's figure out how you can get out and stay out of the quicksand.
No, I love that. And you mentioned just choices. Obviously, your book is really focused on choices, and you go about say we make choices all the time, but we rarely really think about the choices that we're making. And you kind of rank them. Some choices rank higher; they really affect your life, and some are just routine types of choices. And so, I want to ask the question: Why do we not really think much about our choices?
Well, the brain is a self-optimizing memory system. So it is the way we're hardwired is we don't have to think about a lot of our choices. So it's kind of in the software, if you will, or maybe even in the hardware, is a lot of our choices are response type choices. Many of our choices are unconscious choices, but virtually all of our choices are affected by our biases, and we have many. Some we know about and some we don't. So what we found is, knowing that there is a lot of subconscious activity around choices, smart leaders really do focus on those conscious choices. I mean, that's actually all we have control over, right? By definition, a subconscious choice is something we are not consciously deciding or choosing. So the best leaders work on those things that will give them disproportionate return. I often describe it like a set of dominoes that are set up. Is these smart choices are the first, right? They create a chain reaction. They create a ripple effect. Think of them like keystone choices that generate other positive outcomes. So we decided that would be the focus of our work, because the men and women, the smart leaders do make smart choices, but they already know how to lead. This is not a book to tell anybody how to lead. This is for a pitcher that's having trouble hitting the strike zone. If you're not a pitcher, there are other books to teach you to pitch.
Right.
If you're not a leader, I've written other books to tell you how to lead. This is a book for leaders, men and women who are leaders, but they've lost their mojo, right? They can't hit the strike zone. They're encumbered by this quicksand. And one more quick asterisk. I mentioned complexity and busyness and all the COVID stuff. There are other types of quicksand: success, fear, fatigue. I got a text this morning from a leader, and he said, aimlessness is my quicksand. So we've decided to label that entire toxic mix anything that impedes your effectiveness and reduces your impact, because we've all got our own personal blend. The answer is still the smart choices.
No, I love that. And we're going to dive into smart choices. So you talk about smart choices, and there's 4 different categories when looking at making smart choices. The first one is confronting reality. So this is kind of like, it's a very simple term. It's like, okay, confront reality, and really just to think about your choices and think about your life, think about yourself, just being self-aware, right? So talk to us about confronting reality, and why is this so hard too?
Well, yeah. I've asked leaders, and this is a fun little conversation over a cup of coffee, and I usually don't ask a leader point blank. I wouldn't ask you, because that's getting way too personal. But I would say, do you know other leaders that it appears are unwilling to confront reality? And you're going to say, sure. And then I'm going to say, why do you think that is the case? And because I've done this with scores of leaders, I've asked them to think about other leaders. And you can make a long, long list: fear, insecurity. I mean, there are any number of reasons that people who are more concerned with posture over performance, with appearances. There are just so many reasons, but it's never good. It's never good. Only when you choose to confront reality can you lead from a position of strength. And so the best leaders are willing to do that in all areas of their life.
Wow.
They start with themselves. That's what we always recommend. Start with yourself. Start with your leadership. Then confront reality about your team. How good is your team? Because those closest to you are going to determine your level of success. But don't stop there. Confront reality about your health, about your family, about your relationships, about your finances. If you're grounded in truth, you can lead from a position of strength. So these 4 choices are not intended to be sequential, because they're all forever and ongoing. They do create what I believe is a virtuous cycle, but this is first among equals. If you can't confront reality, you're never going to scale your impact. And again, that is the objective. The objective is not to make the choices for the sake of the choices. You make the choices so you can have more impact in the world. You got to start with confronting reality.
I love that. And sometimes we just don't want to hear the answer. So we just ignore it. I love that. So you speak on this confronting reality. So kind of being aware of your reality. And then you talk about pursuing relationships, bringing other people around you to help you confront your reality, maybe someone else that can speak truth into you. So how important is that, like maybe with your own personal life, surrounding yourself with people that can say, Mark, this is what I see.
Sure.
How important is that?
Well, yeah, I'll hit this quick because this is a big idea. It's impossible for any of us to be totally self-aware. I think there's a lifelong journey for leaders, smart leaders, to reduce their blind spots. Well, my favorite strategy is to look for fresh eyes. People who will bring perspective, they'll bring challenge, they'll bring questions, they'll tell you the truth about various facets of your life. There are a lot of ways to do this. A personal board of directors, coaches, mentors, consultants, peer groups. I'm part of a group. We've been meeting, I think this is our 23rd year.
Wow.
We started studying leadership. We meet twice a month, 23 years ago, and they help me. They provide fresh eyes. They help me confront reality about my life and about my leadership. And so any number of strategies, I don't know that the strategy matters as much as the fact that you find help so that you can more honestly and more completely confront reality. It's just critical.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. I'm a big person. I love coaches, consultants, peer groups, and just having people, because it's so hard to just think about yourself, because you have all, like you said, you have all these biased opinions, right? You have your own desires, what you want to do, and I don't know. So it's just really complicated, really, really messy. Let's go into. So you talk about team, right? You got this team around you, especially in your business. And as a leader, a visionary, you got this team around you. And I was talking to someone the other day, and I'm getting into this new kind of project. And I said, "What's your advice, someone new getting into this industry, this area?" And he said, "Number one, take it slow. And number two, team is everything." And so what's your take on that, about the team and on scaling and growing your impact?
Yeah, so that's a big question. So I want to be careful that your audience doesn't assume that the brevity of my response is any reflection on the magnitude of your question. I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah.
I started studying teams over 25 years ago, specifically, consciously, purposefully. I've written a book on that. I'm a huge team guy. We could talk for 3 days about teams. Here's I think that if I could boil it down, teams well led outperform individuals. And it happens about 96% of the time based on the data that I've been able to discover. Now, the 4% you could argue is when they're not led well, because we're smarter together. No matter if your IQ is 180, you put 6 people around the table with you and you still get smarter, right? They bring diverse experience and perspective and skills and passions and gifts. You just get smarter. Yeah. And so there are very few endeavors in the world where I think an individual will outperform a team. Even in the world of sports, this again, another topic for another day, the individuals who excel are supported by a team.
Exactly.
They don't do it by themselves. Yeah. They've got psychologists and trainers and nutritionists and on and on and on and on and on, so that they can perform well in the spotlight. But there are very few individual sports anymore in the world. So huge team guy. And so that's a big blind spot for a lot of leaders. It's an area where they're not willing, for whatever reason, to confront reality. If your team's not strong, you are limiting your impact. Remember, that's the choices aren't the goal. Impact is the goal. Yeah. And so to confront reality about the men and women around your table, it's just essential.
That's amazing. Number 2, growing capacity. So you talk about growing capacity. Another, probably the biggest complaint that I have from business owners, business leaders, is that I don't have any time. I don't have any margin in my life. I'm tired. I'm balancing so much. I was talking to a guy yesterday. He said, I definitely do not need another thing to do. Right. So growing capacity, right? So talk to us about this.
Well, this is the one that I think, particularly in today's world, probably drives leaders crazy when I start talking about it. And I hope your listeners won't shut this off, because that's what we're talking about. Smart leaders make the choice to grow capacity. But it's crazy. It's like that is the fundamental problem, right? Are you working on the fundamental problem? Now, there are a lot of things you can do. Again, we devoted 3, 4, 5 chapters in the book to this. So let me just give you a couple. I want to be mindful of our time here. Let's start with your calendar. We began this interview talking about Drucker. 50, 60 years ago, Drucker said he'd never met a knowledge worker. That's me and you. It's interesting if you want to explore his definition of a knowledge worker, but we work on complex problems and issues. We have some discretion over how we use our time, so forth and so on. We're knowledge workers. 50 years ago, he said he'd never met a knowledge worker that couldn't eliminate 25% of the items on their calendar and no one would notice. I don't know what that number is today, but you got to start fundamentally. You need to clean up your calendar. I've got some specific tactics in the book. We won't get into that. You've also got to manage your personal energy. In your setup, you said some of these leaders are tired. I understand that. What are you doing to manage and steward your energy? Sleep, diet, exercise, nutrition, water, relationships. It's like we have some say-so over our energy, but not if we neglect it, not if we don't focus on it. And here's the last and crazy thing I'll mention is the best leaders build margin into their lives. Now, again, I know people think that is absurd, but here's the story. This was one of the bigger findings from our research. You go back through history, great leaders have always done this, at least going back a couple thousand years. And you say, I just don't have time. It's like, in fact, let me say it like this. I had a leader just last week say, you've lost your mind. He said, I don't have time for a vacation. I said, I'm not talking about a vacation. You may need a vacation. I said, I'm talking about margin as a leadership discipline. So let me tell you what I'm talking about when I say margin. Dedicated time to do some critical activities. Reflect, assess, think, create, and plan. Like, when do you do that? Well, I do that in the shower. I do that in the car. How deep is your level of thinking if you're doing it in the shower and in the car? The best leaders always find time. They make time to reflect, to assess, to think, to create, and to plan. There's a 12-year study that just came out from Harvard, been looking at CEOs and how they use their time for 12 years. They spend 28% of their time alone. Now, I don't know that there's a magic number. That's an average. I don't know your situation or your circumstances, but I would say you add the most value when you're alone. Why? Because that's when you're reflecting, assessing, thinking, creating, and planning.
I love that. So just with that, do you have like a perfect scenario? Is that once a week, you think? Is it once a month? Or is it different for everybody else?
So here's the deal. I would say the bigger your dreams, the bigger your goals, the bigger your challenges, the bigger your responsibilities, the more time you need to do these critical activities. I know a guy who became the president of a multi-billion-dollar company, and he said he immediately doubled his alone time. It's like, but you just became the president of a multi-billion-dollar company. He said, yeah, that's why I had to double the amount of time that I spend reflecting, assessing, thinking, creating, and planning.
Wow.
So I don't know what the magic number is for you, but I would say this: it's a challenge to your audience. For those that have never experimented with margin, block 2 hours next week, 2 hours. Put it on your calendar. And when somebody calls and they want that time, you look at your calendar and you say, no, I'm sorry, I have an appointment. And you protect that time. Well, what do I do in that time? Well, you reflect, you assess, you think, you create, and you plan. Pick a topic, pick an issue. Maybe it's, how are you going to get out of the quicksand? That'd be a great thing to think about.
Yeah, no, I love that. So number 3, fueling curiosity. And this is something just kind of interesting. So just quick story, I bought a guitar a few weeks ago, and people asked me, like, what are you doing? I'm 40, I just turned 42 yesterday, and like, what are you doing? I don't know how to play the guitar. I have no idea, but I'm just curious. I'm curious. I've always wondered if I could do it. And that's just an example, but leaders sometimes they forget to be curious. Like, so take yourself back to the kid. So this is number 3, fueling curiosity. And so talk to us about this, and why do people stop being curious?
Well, first, let me say it's a choice. That it is the third choice that you and I get to decide. Now, we didn't get to decide when we were little because we were all curious. That's how we learned to walk. That's how we learned to speak. That's how we learned everything, right? We had an insatiable level of curiosity. And the world kind of beat it out of us is how we lost it. but that is not the case with the best leaders. I have been asked on and off throughout my career various forms of the question, is there a leadership fountain of youth? And I used to say, I hope so. I'm looking for it. I feel like Ponce de Leon, right? I want to add value as a leader until my last breath. But I really didn't know how to make that a reality. This is the fountain of youth. Curiosity is how you maintain relevance and vitality in a changing world. And if we make this choice, we can continue to add value. So here's the way I would summarize it. Your capacity to grow determines your capacity to lead. Your capacity to grow determines your capacity to lead. And so smart leaders choose to fuel curiosity.
No, I love that. And with that chapter, you kept talking about asking just a lot of questions, maybe asking questions to even strangers. You talk about fresh eyes, getting a fresh perspective, and just continuously asking questions. And that's something I've been doing. Like I said, I'm getting in this new thing, and I just talk to some of the experts. And I said, I just want to sit at your feet and ask you questions,
That's great.
Anyway, so talk to us about that. How important is it to start asking questions?
Yeah, real quick on that. One of the strategies, we devoted an entire chapter to this. It's called Ask, Don't Tell. Now, for leaders, I would say whenever possible. There are times we're going to tell. And so, yes, take that off the table. What I find to be true is the best leaders ask more questions. It's true in my life. The more questions I ask, the better I lead. And so we talk in that chapter about cultivating the skill set of asking great questions. I've even encouraged people to think of it like a game, like a kid. You're going to start collecting questions, and you're going to put them in a bag, and you don't know when you're going to need them, but you've got them if you need them.
Yeah.
I have a granddaughter that loves to collect shells on the beach, and invariably we're going to end up counting them. Well, collect your questions, count them, see how many you can get, and then look for opportunities to use them. And I think you'll take your leadership to the next level.
Yeah. I love that. Last one, create change. So this is your last ask, your choices, creating change when you're making choices. So talk to us about this, creating change.
Well, confronting reality is the first among equals, but this is where the rubber hits the road. If you don't do this one, then the other choices are actually irrelevant. I know leaders, you probably know leaders who know what to do, but they're unwilling to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
You actually have to create change. Some leaders look at change as an inconvenience or a burden. It's like, change is your job. Change is our job as leaders, right? We're supposed to take people from here to there. We're supposed to create a preferred future. Leadership, it's not about control. It is about change. It's about releasing human potential. It's about movement. So many leaders miss this. They just don't create change. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you're going to bat 1,000 on everything you try to change. In fact, our team has started a research project for a 2024 book on change. There are a lot of leaders who need help with change. I'm not disputing it's hard. I'm not disputing that you and I both need to learn best practices. We're out there searching the globe for those right now. But you have to choose to create change.
Yeah.
It's going to be challenging. I don't have a lot to add in the moment, but you really don't have a choice if you're going to be a leader.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, this is an amazing book Mark Miller has written. And again, I'm going to really dig in. There's so much in there that there's just so much meat. It's like you could spend hours just on one chapter of this. So smart leadership. Mark, where's the best place for them to get this book?
I think the best place is on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
The book by the time you see this, will have just recently launched. And we're trying to serve leaders around the world. So check it out there. If you want more information, there is smartleadershipbook.com. The only reason I mentioned that, if you wanted to buy it, it's going to send you to Amazon. But I mentioned that site specifically because there's some free downloads in the book, there are chapters where I really just couldn't write anymore. Yeah. So I created some additional free content. You can access that. Even if you don't buy the book, you can get it at smartleadershipbook.com.
Awesome. Thank you for that, guys. We're going to put that in our show notes, too, on the YouTube channel, so check that out. Mark, I always like to end every show with a little fire round, so I have a couple of questions for you here, and these are just kind of fun, so name the first thing that comes to your mind. I was reading your bio. Sounds like you like adventure. I think you've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, got to the base camp of Everest, jungles of Rwanda. What's been like your favorite memorable adventure?
It might be Kilimanjaro. There have been a lot of great, exciting adventures. Kilimanjaro, I did with my oldest son for his high school graduation gift. And it was our first real adventure. Now, he and I've done quite a few since then, but that was a real highlight. To do that with him made it really special.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. All right, number 2, what's been a big personal challenge for you as a leader? What's been one thing that's really challenged you?
Quicksand. I think quicksand is every leader's challenge. I've been trying to get out of it and stay out of it my whole life, and I think I'll continue. But I'm going to use these choices. Yeah. Just this week, I was having a conversation with my assistant about some quicksand that we could see. Like, here we can see it. Are we going to step in it? And we actually used the choices to go around it. And so I feel like I wrote this book for myself. If it helps others, great. But it's already helping me.
That's good when you're an author and you have a problem and you go to your own book. Love that. All right, last one. What would you tell business owners out there that have a desire to be an author, to be more of the knowledge type of leader like yourself?
You need to get a first draft. I've been writing for about 20 years now. I'm the accidental author. I didn't seek it out. It kind of jumped in my lap. But for the last 20 years, every time I meet an author, I ask for their counsel, wisdom, advice, and best practices, because I still someday maybe I'll become an author. And the consistent, overwhelming advice that I have gotten, that I've applied, and that I pass on is you have to get a first draft. You don't have a book until you have a first draft, and it will be awful. Prepare yourself for that. But you can't make it better until you have something.
Right.
Go back 20 years. It's been 20 years. My first book, I got what today I would call draft 0. I gave it to my wife. She read it and said, it's not half as bad as I thought it would be, which I said, well, I'll take that. And she said, don't you think you should have used some punctuation? And I said, that will be the second draft. And I handed her a red marker.
That's your job.
I don't even don't get caught up in, is it good? Yeah. Is this right? Is this the best way to say it? No, it's not good. No, that's not the best way to say it. And you don't care how to put the punctuation in on that first draft. The advice to people is get a first draft, and then you can turn it into a book.
Yeah. That's awesome. That just reminds me. So 2 days ago, I met with a writing coach, and I met with her, and I said, I have no idea how to write a book. I'm a probably C- English student, and I've never done this before. And she was just like, those are the best people I love to work with. So I'm like, okay, we'll give it a shot. Anyways, Thank you, Mark, for being on the Snodgrass podcast. Awesome, guys. Go check out Smart Leadership on Amazon. Make sure you guys get that. And Mark, it's been a pleasure, man. It's been a blast. Thank you so much.
Been great. Take care.
Thank you so much for checking out the Snodgrass channel. If you like this video, please slam on that like button. And if you really like it, then subscribe to our channel here. And remember to leave us a comment below, and I'm going to try my hardest to reply to all the comments. Thank you guys so much. This is why I do what I do. Every single week, I come out with content that focuses on success, freedom, and living out your purpose. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.